Hello and welcome. You're on Books Corner, and with me today is Air Vice Marshal Arjun Subramaniam, author of a new volume of military history called Full Spectrum: India's Wars between 1972 and 2020. Although the 2020 war or the conflict is still ongoing as we speak. Welcome to this program, Arjun. Pleasure to speak to you again. And this is your second book on India's military conflicts since 1947.
That's correct.
And which one was more enjoyable? The earlier one, which had from 47 to 71, or 72 to 2020?
Well, Nitin, enjoyable is a difficult word to digest for the pure and simple reason that when I look back now, writing about war and conflict from 1947 to 71 was actually a piece of cake for several reasons. One is that access to a lot of secondary sources of material, archival material, was still possible, and you're writing about people who are no longer, most of them are amongst you. Writing about war and conflict at a time when you've seen it and when you've lived through it and when you've engaged with people whom you're writing about has been an extremely challenging proposition. So I think by a long way, this book was far more difficult to write than the previous one.
True. And in fact, some of them are still ongoing. Like, you also have a chapter on the current standoff at the LAC. And of course, you also relate the Sumdarang-Chu or Wangdung incident in 86-87 in Arunachal Pradesh. Now, you've used a lot of primary sources, people who were involved in these operations personally, accessed their archival material, their photographs, but again, then fundamentally putting it together in a very coherent manner would have been a challenge.
I followed the principle of triangulation. In the absence of official documentation that could help me in my research, the only way I could enhance credibility is if I spoke to multiple people about the same operation, multiple people from different orientations, and then tried my best to offer an honest analysis of war and conflict as it transpired on the ground, with minimum amount of window dressing.
That is fundamentally, I think, important, because war history and the perspectives of different people involved in one particular conflict can also be different.
Yes.
There would be people, I'm sure, who will come down on hard on this book and say, well, this didn't happen, I was there. I'm sure you've taken that into account.
By and large, I would say 99.999% I've taken that into account. Well, if one slips through the nest, there's very little I can do. But I can only play back a paragraph that I wrote right at the beginning of the book. That I write this book with great amount of humility.
Right.
I have the greatest respect for all the warriors and the leaders who've participated in the conflict. And as a military historian, it's very easy for me to sit in judgment and write in hindsight.
Exactly.
So there is a sense of immense even awe at the kind of people I've interviewed and the kind of experiences that they have narrated, and therefore, yes, I hope that most of it is exactly as happened on the ground.
I'm glad, and I'm sure it will be, given your kind of emphasis on being very accurate and being very particular about what you are writing or what you have researched. I quite liked one of the things that you've said here, that this book, and I'm quoting from here, this book is also about how the Indian nation state and its armed forces have coped with the changing contours of modern conflict in the decades since 72. And I think the war fighting, nature of war fighting, the theater of war fighting have continuously evolved. I mean, if you look at 84 was the Operation Meghdoot,
Yeah.
which nobody had fought or nobody had even thought of fighting there at those heights, maddening heights and difficult heights. Then, of course, immediately came the IPKF operation. So I think India has been fighting in multi-spectrum, and perhaps is that the reason why you say full spectrum?
Absolutely, you missed out. While Meghdoot was happening,
Yes,
I think barely 8 weeks after Meghdoot was Operation Blue Star.
exactly. And,
And
sub-conventional operation.
sub-conventional warfare,
Yeah.
urban terrain, an environment in which the Indian Army had hardly gained expertise in before that.
Exactly.
So you have high altitude conflict, you have urban terrain, and soon after you are pitchforked into counter-terrorist and counter-insurgency operations in Sri Lanka.
And out of area again.
And I hope one of the things that I'm able to convey is that in such a changing conflict scenario,
Yeah.
large states are always on the back foot.
At least initially.
Yes, at least initially. Large states are always on the back foot initially because the non-state actor or the hybrid actor or the proxy actor has this ability to operate inside the OODA loop of the state.
Exactly.
Why India? You look at the United States.
Oh, it has always faced.
You
this
look at
problem.
Russia.
Yeah.
I mean,
exactly.
it's only after getting surprised in a number of places that they managed to do something different in Crimea.
Exactly. Exactly.
So that has been my endeavor to try and put our varied experiences with war and conflict in the context of the changing character of war.
True. And I think if you the overall record, if you see, of the Indian military, all the three forces, has been stellar in a sense that they have coped well after being initially surprised, as I said, and have turned the tide. I mean, you take any of these wars, not only something that you have written in this book. Look at what happened in 1965, what happened in Jammu and Kashmir, and even as early as the 50s in Nagaland. I think the first few years, the Indian Army didn't know how to cope with the jungle insurgency or jungle warfare. But I think they have mastered it over the years. So when you talk to the warriors and when you juxtapose this with what will happen in the future, does it give you confidence that, given the varied experience that the Indian military has gained and also perhaps digested and absorbed, Indian military is perhaps the most experienced of the lot, one of the few militaries in the world which has had experience of all kinds of war fighting?
That's why sometimes when I used to read about you remember when David Petraeus came up with this concept of winning hearts and minds. I used to say that, boy, winning hearts and minds is an Indian concept.
Exactly.
I mean, say you go back to the days of the early times when the Northern Army commander during Op Meghdoot,
yes,
General Chibber,
ML Chibber, yes.
General Chibber, while he was planning the Siachen operation, his bigger concern was what was in store in Jammu and Kashmir.
Right.
There is a book that General Chibber has produced when he was army commander,
right,
which is called The Role of the Soldier in J&K.
Correct.
It is so prescient even today.
Exactly.
So the thing is, I think the Indian military hasn't articulated itself well enough to be able to punch according to its weight on the global arena.
Right.
And I think that's something that is that's an evolving process.
It is, and it's also in our nature not to tom it too much, unlike the other countries. It reminds me of General B.C. Joshi's 10 Commandments. In the mid-90s, to the soldier, they were told to carry a card where it says what you will not do in Jammu and Kashmir during the anti-terror, counter-terror or counter-insurgency operations. So I think those experiences are very rare in any other militaries. But when you speak to those who were involved, generally my experience again of writing like you on contemporary military history is always that people don't hesitate to share their stories once they know that this will not be distorted. Did you find any resistance from anywhere really, or you got full cooperation from the people you spoke to?
No, I got absolutely no, there was no resistance. And for example, I do have stories that don't go with the grain.
Right.
But that's what war and conflict is all about.
Exactly.
So one of the things I want to convey to the reader is that, look, war and conflict is not all about guts and glory and victory.
It is not, yeah.
Victory and defeat are but small dimensions of the overall landscape of war and conflict.
Exactly.
War and conflict has the noblest of human emotions that it brings out. It also brings out the worst in man.
True.
And so how do you so when you try to balance an endeavor that seeks to showcase a modern military and a fighting military and a competent military like the Indian military, as also tell the truth, it's a challenge. You have to balance it.
Exactly.
And that is I think the biggest challenge of writing contemporary military history.
I'll give you my opinion about this book, and this is an honest book.
Okay.
In the sense that it doesn't hold back, even if there are setbacks that you talk about that the Indian military faced, be it in IPKF, be it in Jammu and Kashmir, or in any other conflict that one talks about. So therefore, it's like you said very rightly, that it's not about victory alone or guts and glory alone. There have been setbacks, there have been defeats, there have been fundamental mistakes made by military leaders. But since you've put that in a context, I think people will understand, the reader will understand. And I think this brings in fills a very big gap, I would say, in the understanding of Indian military.
There's one last point, Nitin. That I mentioned that at several forums in the first book also. Fundamentally, military history has been a neglected facet of contemporary Indian history. It's primarily been seen as a sideshow.
Sure.
The second aspect is that the Indian military, I think, has played a very, very important role in getting Indian democracy to where it is today. Fissures and cracks galore across the length and breadth of the state.
Right.
And when things get bad, who gets in to plug the fissures and cracks? It's the Indian military. And therefore, I think more and more citizens in India should look at the military as a key enabler of stability and democracy in India.
Yes.
Not as it is visualized at many other places around us.
Right. In fact, it stands out in stark contrast to nations around us. The role played by the military in, say, Pakistan, Bangladesh, anywhere else in the region. The Indian military has been apolitical, it has been nation builder in a way, and yet remained largely in the background. It hasn't really taken the frontal role in a way in the governance of the nation. But thank you very much for writing this book. And thanks for sparing your time and coming and talking to us.
Nitin, thank you. It's been a pleasure, and it's been even a greater pleasure to be discussing the book with another fellow military historian.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nitin.
Thank you.